Level 1. These are the games that have only one mechanic. Think about Alto's Adventure. There's only one action, jump. And the goal is simply not to hit the obstacles. There's no system for you to learn, just timing. Other games you can find in this category are Geometry Dash, Vector, and even Google's Dinosaur Game. In the second level, the number of buttons you press stays the same, but the number of systems running in the background increases. Vampire Survivors and the Kingdom series are the clearest examples of this. In the Kingdom series, you're technically pressing only a single button the entire time that you're playing, but behind that one button, there's actually a whole bunch of systems in the background. Economy management, day-night cycle, building up your defenses, assigning workers to jobs, stockpiling resources, and waves of enemies attacking. In Level 3, there are multiple mechanics and multiple systems. Think about Minecraft. There are 3 main systems here: the crafting system, the survival system, and the building system. The complexity is born out of these 3 simple systems being linked together. Night falls, a zombie shows up, which means you need a shelter. But a shelter needs wood, and getting wood means chopping down trees. Some games I can think of in this category are games like Subnautica, Terraria, and The Forest. Level 4 is basically the same as Level 3, except there are far more mechanics and systems. I think the best example is Vintage Story. You can think of it as the harder version of Minecraft. Unlike Minecraft, eating just one type of food over and over isn't enough. You need a properly balanced diet. You also have to keep track of your mental state. If you spend too much time down in the mines, you can lose your sanity. The seasons are real, the rock layers are real, and food genuinely spoils over time. Project Zomboid takes a similar approach. It forces you to manage several metrics all at once, things like hunger, thirst, fatigue, stress, panic, and boredom. These are displayed through little icons called Moodles, and there are more than 10 different Moodles, all which trigger one another. If you get bored, your unhappiness goes up. If you become unhappy, some of your actions start to slow down. When you take a wound, you have to factor in dozens of details. Which part of the body is bleeding, whether the bandage you used is clean, the risk of infection, and so on. Basically, the complexity grows horizontally here with the number of mechanics that you're dealing with, and the number of things that you need to keep in your head all at once. In Level 5, we are no longer managing just a single individual, but an entire city. SimCity 4, Surviving Mars, Frostpunk, Banished, Song of Six. It's not just that the mechanics themselves get more complicated, the depth of the systems running underneath everything increases as well. In these games, the way hundreds of individuals or systems interact with one another reaches an incredible scale. Cutting off a single resource can send the entire city spiraling into a chain reaction collapse. Let's take SimCity 4 as our example. Let's say you place a factory in a zone. The factory creates jobs. Jobs increase demand for housing. Housing increases the population. Population increases traffic. Traffic slows down the daily commute, which in turn lowers production. At the same time, the factory generates pollution. Pollution drives down land value. Once land value drops, wealthier residents leave the city, and tax revenue shrinks as a result. Dozens of consequences branch out from a single decision, and this is exactly what we mean by complexity here. It's not about the number of systems, it's about how many different systems a single decision touches at the same time. Song of Six has that same kind of depth, and it actually takes it a step further. Most city-building games treat population as an abstract number. In Song of Six, tens of thousands of individuals are simulated one by one, each with their own lineage, religion, fears, and desires. On top of that, you are managing multiple races within the same city: humans, dwarves, elves, and an insect-like race. Each of them has different needs when it comes to food, shelter, and religion. Because so many individuals are being simulated simultaneously, a single small event, a famine, an uprising, can be enough to bring down an entire kingdom. Level 6. Here, the learning curve gets even steeper, and what you're really being asked for is pure engineering thinking and problem-solving ability. Some games in these categories are Factorio, of course, Satisfactory, Mindustry, and Dyson Sphere Program. To actually be able to play these games, you need to have a bit of analytical thinking. In Factorio, you use the resources around you to set up the production chains that you need in order to build a rocket. You mine ore, smelt it down, manufacture goods, and within a fairly short amount of time, you start automating everything. For that, you use inserters and conveyor belts. There are 3 different belt speeds: yellow, red, and blue, and each one changes how many items that you can carry per second. To hit the right production rate for a given item, you genuinely have to sit down and do the math. For example, if you can't produce a certain gear fast enough per second, the 10 other production lines that depend on that gear all slow down as well. The ultimate goal is to build a rocket and leave the planet, but to get there, you have to work your way through the research tree, connect together dozens of subsystems, everything from processing uranium all the way to nuclear power. And on top of all of that, defend yourself against enemies, and that in itself means building even more production lines. Another example is Satisfactory. You can think of it as the three-dimensional version of that same idea. Here, the goal is to keep feeding the space elevator for the Fix-It Corporation, producing increasingly complex parts as you go. In Satisfactory, making use of vertical space is absolutely vital. You can't just keep expanding horizontally. You have to build skyscraper-like factories floor by floor, move resources up to higher levels using vertical lifts, and plan your factory's layout in a way that can serve space as efficiently as possible. Dyson's Sphere program has a similar logic, but instead of fitting your entire factory onto a single planet, you build a logistics network that moves resources back and forth between multiple planets. The ultimate goal here is to construct a massive sphere of energy-collecting structures that surrounds an entire star. Then there is Mindustry. You can think of it as a hybrid between a hardcore factory automation game and a tower defense game. Where Factorio has enemies, Mindustry puts combat right at the dead center of your logistics network. You aren't just mining copper, lead, and titanium to unlock the next tier of research. You are constantly routing those materials directly into your turrets to survive the next wave of enemies. But where Mindustry truly earns its place at this level is its deeper engineering mechanics. Later in the game, it introduces a literal logic system. You can build microprocessors and write code using a simplified assembly language to dictate exactly how your automated mechs behave, dynamically shut down certain factories if your power grid dips, or perfectly balance your fluid pipelines. You aren't just calculating production rates anymore. You are writing actual software to keep your base alive. So the games at this level stop treating you as just a player and start forcing you to think like a systems architect and a logistics expert. And finally, level 7, the classic roguelikes. What defines the games at this level is their absurd degree of realism, along with hundreds of mechanics and their interactions with each other. Dwarf Fortress, Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead, and Caves of Qud. Playing these games without a wiki or tutorial is basically impossible. And because the games are so complex, the developers didn't pay any attention to the graphics. Instead, all of the focus goes into the game's depth and complexity. In Cataclysm, for example, even a single action depends on dozens of different variables. Let's say that you want to break down a door. Is your strength enough for it? Do you have a suitable tool in hand? What material is the door made of? How much noise is it going to make? How many meters away will that noise attract zombies? Every single one of these is calculated separately. Nutrition isn't just represented by a single hunger bar. Calories, vitamins, and protein are all tracked separately from one another. If you keep eating nothing but canned food, you can actually develop real illnesses from vitamin deficiency, scurvy, for instance. And the cure for it is realistic too. You need to go find oranges or some kind of vitamin C supplement. There are thousands of crafting recipes in the game, and each one demands a genuinely realistic chain of steps. To repair a rifle, you first need to develop your metalworking skill, track down the right tools, and read specific books in order to learn that recipe. If you want to learn a skill, you need to use that skill repeatedly or take lessons from an NPC. You can design a car completely from scratch, welding the chassis together piece by piece, and mounting the engine, the fuel tank, the wheels, and even a weapon turret yourself. Engine type, fuel type, gasoline, diesel, electric, even solar panels, weight distribution, all of it affects the vehicle's speed and durability through genuinely realistic physics formulas. Another game worth mentioning is Dwarf Fortress. You can think of it as the medieval fantasy version of Cataclysm. When you start the game, hundreds of years of history are simulated before you even begin playing. Kingdoms rise and fall, wars break out, heroes are born and die. By the time you actually start playing, you're stepping into a world that already has its own history behind it. Each individual dwarf has his own personality, memories, and relationships. If a dwarf loses someone close to him, he will grieve. The characters can develop trauma, and they might even snap entirely and go on a killing spree. This chain reaction breakdown, known in the community as a tantrum spiral, well, the mental collapse of just one single dwarf can be enough to tear apart the entire fortress. The production chain runs just as deeply, everything from the mining, smelting, and processing ore, all the way to knowing exactly which metal is suited to which weapon, is handled by a system that comes remarkably close to real-world metallurgy. Building your fortress, meanwhile, is a three-dimensional puzzle all its own. Dig in the wrong spot, and you might rupture an underground lake and flood your entire fortress. NetHack is the oldest game on this list. It has been in continuous development since 1987, making it one of the longest-running game projects in existence. The game takes place in a procedurally generated dungeon with dozens of levels, where your goal is to level up by defeating creatures. There are over 375 unique monster types, each requiring a tailored tactical response, along with over 121 distinct player actions and hundreds of interconnected environmental variables. Characters can die instantly from obscure events, such as choking to death from eating too much food. If you want to know the development story behind Cataclysm and Factorio, I have 2 videos about them, and you can watch them by clicking on the videos on the screen. And I'll see you in the next video.